Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to another edition of Sunday School. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, and today on Sunday School, we're going to talk about something very close to my heart, all right? Something that most of the DBs out there have a little experience with, most of the DBs, and that is the star spot, the nickel position. Been talked about a lot here during training camp for the Longhorns. One of the most, I think, discussed position groups and positions in all of training camp for the Longhorns. You got a lot of different players. They're experimenting at that nickel spot. And we'll talk about what makes that nickel spot such a special and impactful, relevant position. And we'll even go back through the lineage of it, all the way back to when I played the nickel, which I hate to say it. Maybe it's just me being a little bit, maybe it's my ego, right? Maybe a little ego here and maybe a little self-obsessed. But I do think by the time I started playing the nickel position is when the game started to evolve to a more spread-oriented, pass-oriented game, and teams started to use more nickel backs right around that time. I came in 1999. I'll explain why that's the case. Before we do, thank you to our friends over at Duck Camp, duckcamp.com. We'll tell you some more about our friends over at Duck Camp, but happy to have them back on with our friends over here on Texas Football. Really love Duck Camp. Go check them out at duckcamp.com. I'll give you a message from them later on in this program. But when I got to Texas, right around 1999, right? I mean, I came into the Big 12. The Big 12 was still a ground and pound league. Nebraska was basically running. Nebraska had won the national title, I believe, in 97. I came to UT in 99, and my first duty in the backfield was as a nickelback. I was the nickelback. I started, I believe, 3 games as a freshman to nickelback, which was rare. The only reason I did that is because I had just came to the Big 12 at the really it was the start of the air raid era of the Big 12, right? Mike Leach comes in with Bob Stoops with Oklahoma in 1999 was his first year, I believe. They win the national title in 2000, his second year. Mike Leach is already moved on, I believe, from that from there to Texas Tech, I believe, like a year later. He ends up moving on, but Oklahoma wins the national title running the air raid, which essentially terraformed the Big 12. It basically ended up terraforming the Big 12 into a spread league almost overnight. Like I said, Nebraska, I come into the league, Nebraska still running the league. They're running, option football. Everybody in the league's got fullbacks on the roster. I mean, it is still old school. I mean, I came in with some fullbacks, right? It is still old school football. And then within probably 2 to 5 years, the air raid starts to just spread across the league and proliferate. First going to Texas Tech with Mike Leach, and then starts to spread all over the league. But by that time, when I come in 99, teams are still using 40 personnel, 4 defensive backs on the field as their base defense. And then as they encounter more spread attacks that are spreading them out with more wide receivers on the field, then you see teams start to go with sub packages with nickel, which is 5 DBs on the field, that nickel, star, the slot corner, whatever they want to call it. Everybody's got a different name for it, but it's all pretty much the same responsibilities. That's when teams start to transition to become a nickel as their base defense. Now, pretty much college and pro nickel package, which is 5 DBs on the field, is your base. You run that more than you run any other personnel grouping. With 4 DBs on the field or with 6 DBs, most teams around the college football, most teams in the NFL, they're running nickel. But that said, that wasn't the case in 1999 when I first got to the league. And what really happened was, like I said, Oklahoma ended up winning the national title, running the air raid in 2000. Remember that we get blown out. And then Texas is tasked with trying to figure out a way to solve the air raid. They got to figure out an antidote for it. And Bob Stoops brought in that offense with his defense and boom, struck gold. And honestly, Coach Akina was, I would say he was the mastermind that came up with a simplistically brilliant solution to countering the air raid. Only the way Texas could do it. Not everybody could do it that way. Everybody had to do it their own way. But essentially, Coach Akina came up with, I need the 5-tool DB. I need a DB on the field that can cover. All right, man coverage or zone coverage. He can tackle. Right? He's got ball skills and he got great football IQ. I believe that's the 5 tools of the 5-tool DB. Right? That guy can end up playing corner, he can end up playing safety, he can end up playing nickel, which is why he had so many guys when he was looking for that 5-tool DB or developing those 5-tool DBs. He had so many guys end up playing corner, end up playing safety. His first secondary in 2001 that I was a part of at Texas, I was a corner. I played nickel my freshman year. Prior to that, started at corner in 2000, and I was a corner. Quentin Jammer had started at safety, and he ended up being moved to corner. Mod Brooks had lost his job at starting corner, and then ended up winning the job at safety. All right, and Nathan Basher came in as an athlete that ended up moving to nickel, and then they moved him back to safety, and then later ended up playing corner. My man Dakari Pearson, shout out to Dakari Pearson, who was a freshman All-American at safety. He also played some nickel. I believe he was one of our nickel backs that time. So all of his guys, he was cross-trained. His belief was, I got to have because of this air raid, I need to have coverage guys, all right, coverage guys at every position. Coverage specialists, I should say, at every position. So everybody can cover in the secondary. My safeties can cover like corners, and my corners can tackle like safeties. All right. So there is no, disadvantage. There's no liability in that secondary. They're all just 5-tool DBs. Now, I know some of y'all got jokes out there. Your ball skills, Rod B, you was a 4-tool DB. Ha ha, I'll get it out of the way with it. Yeah, I was not a 5-tool DB. Like, I think it hits it's zenith. All right, the 5-tool DB philosophy with Michael Huff, right? Michael, that 2005 secondary, you got Michael Huff in that secondary, you got Mike Griff in that secondary, Said Griff in that secondary. All those guys that Said Griff came in as an athlete, safety, played nickel early on, and then end up switching to corner. And Huff came in as an athlete that could play corner. They put him at nickel early on. Could play corner, was a safety that covered like a corner, but they left him in there, and him and Mike Griff were so good. Mike Griff played nickel early on too. They were so good by the time they got as starters in that 2005 secondary, they were interchangeable. They were interchangeable pieces, right? Both those guys just rotate. There was no difference in the strong safety, free safety, nickel, and strong safety, free safety, nickel. They both could be either one of those at any given time. That's probably the freakiest a Texas secondary has ever been. In addition to having NFL corners on the outside that can lock you down, Thorpe Award winners on the outside lock you down, your safeties were versatile. They were versatile, and they were multiple safeties. They could do anything. And that was the brainchild of Coach Aquino. That's how we combat the air raid. The air raid is just trying to look for matchup advantages, mismatches in the passing game. We won't give them any. And Texas is one of the only programs that could recruit those types of athletes in the secondary everywhere. And they did. And they still are recruiting those types of athletes. So essentially, that's when the nickel position became so vital and so important. It is arguably the toughest position is to play in the secondary. I believe it is. And most of the DBs I talk to agree with that. Toughest position to play in the secondary because everything happens quicker the closer you are to the football. So it's tough to be able to read and process a lot at nickel because you're like surrounded on all sides. The receiver has a two-way go. You could be getting cracked by the outside receiver. You are also going to be in on primary run support and the run fits because you're you're closer to the box. So you're at linebacker depth. So you might end up taking on blocks, taking on tight ends, taking on running back, taking on linemen every now and then in the run game. You got to deal with some of the elite receivers with a two-way go. So leverage doesn't exist like it does at corner. At corner, I have the sideline as another defender, no matter what side I'm on, and I know where my help is, right? I got help inside usually somewhere, or I got help in the post to know where your help is, and then determine your leverage. At the slot corner, there's you know where your help is, but it's tough to have leverage, right? Have a leverage advantage when the receiver has a two-way go. It's just, and you got to be really comfortable covering in chaos because you're reading a lot, because you're processing a lot, because your progressions are someone who also has to pay attention to the run fits. You're not pass first all the time like you are at the cornerback position. You your fundamentals and technique are going to be often flawed when you're in coverage. You're not going to have the perfect footwork, perfect hand placement. You know what I mean? You're not going to have that upfield shoulder all the time. You're going to have to adjust on the fly. So oftentimes, I always say at nickel and at that slot corner, yes, there's a baseline of athleticism you have to have. That's why I always say if you can play nickel at Texas, you got a Sunday skill set. You got a skill set that could possibly, translate to the NFL. Like, matter of fact, most of the time it does translate to the NFL because that position is so difficult to play. And that's kind of what I went out to prove here in my theory was, what's the NFL hit rate? What's the NFL draft rate of the Texas of guys who have played the star position, nickel position, slot corner position at Texas? Went all the way back to Rod B, old man. Because I think ultimately because of the difficulty of that position and how diverse your skill set needs to be able to achieve at the nickel position. Like I said, that translates to me to you being an NFL guy. And not everybody can play it because you got to look for that baseline of athleticism. So not everybody has the change of direction. Not everybody has got the feet, they got the hips. Not everybody has the disciplined eyes. Not everybody has the instincts and all that kind of stuff to play it. But I think your instincts and your IQ matter as much, if not more, than your baseline of athleticism at that nickel corner spot. The farther you are away from the football, listen, football IQ and acumen, it matters, of course. But when you're out playing corner and playing wide receiver out there, it's more about winning your one-on-ones. You're in a one-on-one battle out there, right? Even tackle and edge. Think about it. You're isolated on islands, one-on-one battles. So that superior athleticism really translates out there as well it should. And it translates inside too. But like I said, inside, it's less space for you to be able to, assert your athleticism, right? To be able to manipulate that space. You got small spaces. Everything's happening a lot quicker. So there's not a lot of time to process. So I need guys who are just really instinctive, really instinctual, who understand leverage, who are naturally play with good body lean, who get good pad level. Like all those things kind of matter naturally at DB because you can so easily get put out of position, right? So that's what I started looking at, right? I started looking at all the DBs who ever played nickel at Texas and went all the way back to 1999. And the strange thing is, because I did it like multiple ways. I went anecdotally, just off memory. So what I remember as who played the DB position since 1999, since I played it. Then I went to look at depth charts and rosters just to make sure the depth charts and rosters what guys were actually listed as a nickel and star. By the way, they didn't start listing nickels and stars on depth charts I could find until like after 2010. They wasn't even really, but they were just like safety, corner, strong safety, free safety, cornerback. That was it. They didn't even start listing star and slot and nickel until like 2010, somewhere around there, which is crazy considering, teams had been already using nickel as its base. You don't start seeing them show up on depth charts regularly until, like I said, 2010, somewhere around there. Shocked me a little bit too. And then I watched games because sometimes the depth charts and all that don't tell you the story. So I watched select games going way, way back to the early 2000s, trying to say, who's starting at nickel for Texas? Who got reps at nickel? Who got reps at the star? And then on top of that, so that's kind of where I started my list. So I'll give you that right now. All right, that's where I started my list. All right, I went look at film, went and searched Google depth charts and rosters, and like I said, I went and actually watched the games. And I remember a lot. I've been covering the program for a while. I remember a lot of the guys as a member of DBU myself who played the nickel spot. So I ended up with 27. Just from that formation, I ended up with 27. I took out the guys who are still on campus who are playing nickel right now. That's Jelani McDonald, Michael Taft's in that category as well, and Jalen Gilbo. So those two guys who have actually played nickel or gotten significant playing time at the nickel, star, slot corner position who are still on campus. Only 3 of them, right? I took those guys out of the sample. Left me with 27 DBs who had started, been listed, or got significant playing time at the nickel or the star spot. Out of those 27, I end up with a 37% NFL draft rate, which is, I mean, more than a third of those guys end up getting drafted. That includes myself. And then I looked at the NFL hit rate, just guys who made it to the league, even if they weren't drafted as an undrafted free agent, and didn't have to stay in the league a long time, but just got their cup of coffee in the league, signed a contract of some kind in the league. They might have got cut, but they made it to a camp of some kind, signed a contract with the league, right? Just that was kind of the baseline criteria to say they were a guy that at least the NFL was interested in. They made it on somebody's NFL board, and the NFL decided to invest. Somebody in the NFL invested in them. That number ended up with 14 out of the year 27. So more than half of your nickel slot corners since 1999, down by 26 years or whatever it is. 51.8% of them got a shot in the league. Either drafted, undrafted free agent, signed practice squad, got on in training camp, got cut, released, whatever it is, right? I still counted those guys. So it's 14 out of 27. That ain't bad. Like I said, you got some undrafted free agents in that bunch, like PJ Locke and Duke Thomas and Adrian Phillips is in that category too. Like just really, really good players ended up undrafted free agents and ended up carving out a career in the NFL for themselves. So essentially, baseline your NFL draft rate, all right, draft hit rate for the slot corners at Texas is around 37%. And then your NFL hit rate, just guys who made it, even if they were undrafted, is 51%. That's pretty good. That's basically kind of what I've been saying in my head. I've been like, man, half the guys who play that position, they get a shot in the league. It's because it takes a Sunday skill set to be able to play a position that difficult. With that's such a wide-ranging array of skills and traits that you have to be able to play a position. That's a Sunday skill set. So I took it even further. All right. I took it just a little bit further. So not only did I look at guys who were listed, all right, listed at nickel and star on the depth chart and on the roster. Anecdotally, the guys who I remember actually playing it, whether it's a coach experimenting with them in the game or they actually got significant playing time and started there. Also the guys who I went and watched film on, like, oh, okay, yeah, he's actually playing nickel. When I was watching film, it got me to thinking. There are often times where players, and Sarkis talked about this, right? Sarkis said they're cross-training a lot of the safeties to play nickel. They're cross-training guys like, all the Jelani McDonald, of course, is cross-training there, but he talked about some of the Derek Williams, Michael Taft is cross-training there. And the reason is because oftentimes through offensive manipulation, if you will, them trying to hunt matchups, they, based on how they configure the formations, they can get a matchup advantage by getting a safety, all right, to essentially line up at the nickel position, right? And based on how they're manipulating the formation, they could force the defense to have to adjust schematically. And one of the adjustments will be, got that safety now down playing that nickel position and force that nickel, whether they're playing a zone or a split field coverage, force that nickel to actually take on safety responsibilities, right? Sark can do this too offensively. He's a genius at it. So it's got me thinking about those. So I went and looked at the alignment snaps of players too, to find out actually how often are some of these safeties ended up defending the slot. Because it happened to Andrew McCouba actually a lot last year. There were triple-digit snaps where he's essentially schematically adjusted and is the de facto quasi-nickel. Ends up playing, which they have no problem with because he's a guy that had played nickel when he was at Clemson. And that's what they love about him in the NFL is that he's a coverage specialist at safety because he played nickel and can play corner, but he hits like a linebacker. Right? So his smallish frame is not a big deal. But there are times when, because of the schematic adjustment, oh man, that safety has to roll down and basically play that nickel. That nickel has to drop back, end up taking on safety responsibility. They just kind of exchange duties. So I started looking at that because I'm a sicko. So I started looking at how often, sir, is there, and it had to be, a broad sample. So if you had just like a few snaps where you covered the slot, I didn't consider that. But if you had over 100 snaps defending the slot as a slot corner or a nickel, I put that into a sample. So you know what? I got to put that, because that's part of Coach Akina's 5-tool DB philosophy. Is that at one point, all these guys are going to be interchangeable. And we're going to be a truly a multiple and malleable defense. And you're not going to be able to manipulate matchup advantages, because a Mike Griff and a Mike Huff essentially can flow between being a free safety, field safety, a boundary safety, a strong safety, a nickel slot corner, whatever you're trying to achieve offensively, they can solve those problems. They have a solution for it. And it is the multiplicity. It is the position flex of those DBs. And that's basically what this is all about, right? Position flex offers you solutions to problems that offense is going to present. So I'll put those guys in sample. If you got triple digit snaps defending the slot, essentially you being adjusted to have that responsibility within the scheme, I put those guys in there too. And it's interesting because a lot of those safeties, a lot of your safeties ended up defending the slot a lot. Makuba, I threw in that sample size. Caden Stearns, Jaren Thompson, Deshaun Elliott, because a lot of times your safeties have to rotate down and defend that slot depending on what the formation presents and how with pre-snap shifts and movements, what that formation ultimately becomes. And as a defense, hey, sometimes you don't necessarily have the built-in solution. So it ends up, my safety has to roll down and play the slot on that side instead of us either rolling or we roll or bump that coverage instead of having that nickel travel all the way across the field. Depends on your scheme, depends on the rules of your scheme. So I looked at the safeties who also were responsible for slot corner duties. All right. And I went back as far as you could go. So I went back probably like a 10-year sample size on that, where I could look at from like 2024, like 2014, who defended the slot the most. And so I threw those guys in there as well. So with that entire sample size, in addition to what we discussed before, here's the numbers. I got 31, 31 defensive backs who either were labeled as a nickel slot corner, who I saw myself play the nickel slot corner or watching on film, or they were a defensive back who were forced to defend the slot based on schematic adaptations and adjustments. So that's as big as the sample size could get. Here's your NFL hit rate for that. NFL hit rate is 61%. Your NFL draft rate is 41.9%. So you're basically at 42% of the DBs who have had to defend the slot for Texas since 1999. All right, they get drafted. And you're at 61% of them end up getting a shot in the league. If you can defend the slot at Texas, proves my point, you got a Sunday skill set. So if it's Grayson Littleton, he is truly a prodigy. If it's Michael Taft, we already know Michael Taft's got an NFL future. Lon McDonald's got an NFL future. Depends on who else they're trying to work in there at Wardell Mack. If he ends up being that guy, if Jalen Gilmore ends up bumping back inside, whoever ends up playing that slot corner for Texas, remember those numbers. Really good chance that guy's going to play on Sundays. All right, let's thank our sponsor, Duck Camp, before we end things. Duck Camp makes gear for folks who live for being out there, whether that's in a duck blind or a sunrise or on the 40 acres for a Sunday or for a Saturday kickoff. Born right here in Austin, Duck Camp builds best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel that works just as well for a full day in the field as it does for a long day of tailgating. From sun protection shirts that keep you cool during those early season scorchers to their iconic game series hats that feel like instant classics Texas Duck Camp gear is ready for football season, hunting season, and every season in between. Get out there, stay out there, and hook them. Shop Duck Camp at duckcamp.com. Thank you to our friends over at Duck Camp. We appreciate their ongoing support of On Texas Football. And thank you guys for joining and for watching. For my friend Matthew as well, we appreciate him. He's the real MVP. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Beavers. Thank you to Duck Camp as well. Until next time, hook 'em horns.